It's time to get our hands dirty and dig into a demo of the AWS Simple Storage Service, or S3 as it's called. In this demo, I'm going to log into the AWS Management Console and show you how you can create buckets and create objects, upload objects into those buckets using the web-based Management Console. We'll talk about dealing with anonymous access. How do we grant access to people who are simply trying to download these files via a web browser? They don't have any permissions. They are an anonymous user effectively. Lastly, we'll take a look at how you can work with versions. We'll enable versioning on our bucket and set it up so that we can upload multiple versions of a file and see exactly how Amazon AWS treats those versions. We'll begin by logging into the Amazon console, the management console, at aws.amazon.com. If you don't already have an account, you'll want to go ahead and create one, set one up here at the same URL. If you already have an Amazon retail account, you can use that, but you do have to activate it for AWS before you can continue. We'll select the Sign into Console button. I'm already logged in. And you can see right here that Amazon S3 is right on the main dashboard under Storage and Content Delivery. I'll select Amazon S3, and this is going to launch the S3 dashboard for me. The first thing that it's going to do is show me all of the buckets that I have created. And, well, guess what? I have not yet created any buckets inside of this account. So I get a nice big blue Create Bucket button. I think that's obviously the button that we want to choose. And I only have two options, really, for setting up a bucket: the bucket name and the bucket region. Now recall that bucket names have to be globally unique. So if I wanted to name my bucket Amazon, regardless of the region I chose, that's not going to work. The regions, of course, are where you want to store your bucket. I'll leave it at Oregon, but you can choose whatever region makes most sense for you. Again, that bucket name is globally unique. It doesn't matter what region I choose. That name has to be unique across all regions. When I click Create here, yeah, it's going to yell at me. Hey, Amazon is not a bucket name that's already in use. Let's call it CBT Tech Essentials. I like that name. I think that's going to be pretty unique. No one else is going to have CBT Tech Essentials as their bucket name. Once I've done that, it's very, very fast. You see it's already up and running. I've got my bucket over here on the left-hand side along with a whole bunch of details about that bucket. Now if I just click CBT Tech Essentials right here, it's going to put me or browse me into the bucket, and you can see that it's currently empty. But if I want to upload a file to it, easy. I click the Upload button. Whoa, I bet that was a big surprise. From here, this is just like any other upload dialog box that you've probably worked with on the web. I'll choose to add files. And inside of the file browser here, I've got a cbtlogo.png that I'd like to upload. So now it's listed there, and I can simply say Start Upload, and that will upload this file into my bucket. Now you should have noticed also that there was an extra options there. If I choose this again, and let's go ahead and choose that file one more time, I can choose to set the details. And underneath the details, you can see I choose my storage class: Standard, Standard Infrequent Access, IA, or Reduced Redundancy, RRS. Now, you don't see Glacier here. We talked about that being a storage class as well, and Amazon really treats Glacier as a separate product. If you want to upload files or migrate them from S3 into Glacier, you're going to do that through the Glacier dashboard. We're not going to demonstrate that here. I'll leave it at standard storage. I can also choose to use server-side encryption. And if I use server-side encryption, there are two options when I'm working with the dashboard. I can use an Amazon S3 Service Master Key, and that basically means that anyone who has permission to the object has the key and can decrypt it and download it. I can also use a neat feature called the AWS KMS, Key Management Service, and that's going to allow me to set up some specific details about which key actually has access to this object. When it comes to highly secure data that I really want to control the encryption and regulate who has access to that encryption, this is the service, this is the feature that I'm going to want to use. But for demonstration purposes, we'll leave that unchecked. I don't want to deal with encryption at all. I'll use standard storage. I can also choose to set permissions if I would like, and here I have grant me full control. I can also choose to make this object public. We'll deal with that in a second. Once I click Upload here again, recall that I already had this file uploaded. Well, all I did was upload it again. It overwrote the existing one, and because I don't have versioning set on, I lost the old one. Now, they were the same file, not a big deal for me, but that's something to keep in mind. Once this file is uploaded, you see it's listed here on the left-hand side. I'm in CBT Tech Essentials, the bucket. There's the file, CBT logo, that is uploaded. And if I select it, now let's close this transfers window, and choose Properties up here in the upper right, what I'm going to see are the properties of this object. Here's a whole bunch of different data about it listed. I can click Details to see what encryption or what storage class it's using. Permissions is going to tell me who has access to it, and you'll see that the only grantee is Ben.Finkel. That's my current user. And right here you notice a link for it with a little padlock symbol next to it. Now I know what you might be thinking, Ben, that URL looks a little bit different than the URL you were using inside of your slides. And yeah, this is the direct URL, the DNS URL. You'll notice it's s3-us east-west-2. That is the region, the endpoint for the specific storage region that I stored this bucket in. And then the bucket name is here inside of the URL, CBT Tech Essentials, and then the key, cbtlogo.png. The version I showed you had bucket name.s3.amazon.aws.com/object key. There are two different ways to get to the exact same thing. So you don't have to worry about which particular method you use. They both work exactly the same. There's not a problem using either one. Now if I select this, what do you think is going to happen? Well, in theory, it should open up or download the file for me. In practice, what do I get? I get access denied. Why did I get access denied? Well, this URL is just a URL. It's just a public, anonymous GET request over the web. And as we saw when I set up my permissions, I didn't give the public permission to this. I didn't give anonymous access permission to this. Only Ben.Finkel has access to this, this particular file. So I can say add more permissions right here. And for the grantee, I'm going to choose everyone. And I'm going to give them the ability to open and download. Not view permissions and not edit permissions. Just to open or download this file. I'll click Save. Now everyone has permission. And if I refresh this, boom, there it is. I've got my file. So it's important to understand when you're creating new buckets and you're uploading new objects that the permissions may not be public right away unless you configure it properly. Now, of course, it would be a giant pain in the butt if I come here and set it back to the way it used to be. I'll delete this permission, click Save. If I had to change the permissions on every file that I uploaded, otherwise it was going to get access denied, what if I want to store, the images on a public website? Well, the way to do that is to actually set up permission defaults on your bucket itself. So if we navigate back to all buckets and I choose CBT Tech Essentials, look at the properties. Underneath permissions, I have Add Bucket Policy. This is a really neat feature. What I can do inside of this bucket policy editor is right here into this text box, I can paste JSON, JSON, JavaScript object notation, that indicates what the policy for this bucket should be. Now, if you're not familiar with JSON, or you are familiar with JSON, but you're not familiar with the specifics of the AWS bucket policy language, that would be, not surprising. They have a nice little AWS policy generator here that I can choose. And I'm going to click that, and I'm going to choose what the policy type is going to be. I want it to be an S3 bucket policy. I want to allow, and I'm going to put asterisk in here. I want to allow anyone to get a object. I'll scroll down here and find get object. So the get object permission is now selected. And then lastly, on what resource do I want to allow this permission for these principals? And it gives an example here of what's called the Amazon resource name, ARN. This is a unique identifier to use across all of AWS services. I'm actually just going to copy it onto the clipboard here, paste it in, and then I'll delete the two pieces that I have to fill in, bucket name and key name. For bucket name, I'll call CBT Tech Essentials. And then / and for the key name, I'm going to use an asterisk again. That's another wildcard. Click Add Statement. There's my statement, my principal asterisk, have an allow get object on all objects. I'll see Generate Policy. It pasted that JSON right into this for me. Now I can also use this as a sort of starting template. If I don't want to write the JSON myself from scratch, I can generate a policy, then cut and paste this into my own editor, do whatever I need to do with that. Click Close. Or rather, I want to copy it to the clipboard first. Click Close. Come back here and paste it right in. And I will say Save. And now that policy has been applied to this particular bucket. And if I come into Tech Essentials and look at this object permissions, notice that padlock is gone from the link. That's because this is now a publicly accessible URL. Instead of access denied, I'm going to get the logo, because now I've said every object that gets uploaded into this bucket is viewable. They can use the get object command against every object, regardless of who the principal is, essentially enabling anonymous access over HTTP. Now, what do you say we finish up by looking a little bit at versioning? That's another thing that happens at the bucket level. So I'm going to come back here to my bucket, and I'm going to pull down the versioning option over here, and you can see it's not enabled currently, but I will say enable versioning. When I select enable versioning, it's going to take a moment to spin on and turn on. And once it's done, you'll see now that the option to suspend versioning is there. So I cannot turn off versioning and get rid of all my old versions. All I can do is suspend versioning. So it's basically an on or an off kind of thing. If I suspend versioning, any versions inside of my bucket will remain. They're always there until I physically do something with them, because they are effectively copies of my object. So if I choose my bucket here, and I'll say upload, and once again I'm going to upload cbtlogo.png. Now what's neat about this is because now I have versioning turned on, I actually only see, when I choose Tech Essentials, I only see the single logo here, cbtlogo.png. But if I choose versions show, notice this new choice up here, look at that, there's my two versions. The null version that was already there when I when I first uploaded it and then turned on versioning. Recall that objects have a null version until you turn on versioning. And then here is the version I just uploaded with its new cool version ID. And I can select either of these objects, view their properties, delete them, change their permissions. You can deal with each version individually because each version is effectively its own object. Now, if you're wondering about how I get access to the object, well, up here at cbtlogo.png, I'll hide my versions. The basic URL just points to the newest version, the most current, the most recently updated or uploaded copy of this file. But when I show my versions, you can see if I select an individual version, look at that. There's a version ID put right inside of that URL. That's going to get me to that specific version of this object. When it comes to deleting objects, versioning does a really neat thing as well. If I select this object and right-click it and delete it, I'm going to say OK. That file is now deleted. Look at the bucket CBT Essentials is empty. Well, of course it is. I deleted that file. But versioning was turned on. What happened there? Well, if I show versions, what you can see, I'm going to refresh the page here, is that the old versions of that object are still there, but now there is what's called a delete marker on the top of the stack or on the top of the pile. That means that if I try to go to this file, if I try to look up this file here, I'm going to get a 404 error, or in this case, access denied. It couldn't find the file. It doesn't exist. It's not there. But that's because the delete marker is there. I'm essentially told the system this object has been deleted. I can always come here, choose the delete marker, and actually delete the delete marker, thus removing it from the stack, removing it from the pile. Now that file has effectively been returned to my bucket. When I hide my versions, there's the file. It's come back. And it really hasn't come back. I've just gotten rid of that delete marker off the stack, and I'm now looking at the most current version once again. That concludes this demonstration of AWS Simple Storage Service, or S3 as it's known. To recap, we logged into the Web Management Console and we took a look at how we could easily create buckets and then upload objects into those buckets. We demonstrated how initially the permissions on those objects are restricted just to the admin user, myself, on the account, but we could enable anonymous access either specifically on an object or by setting up a bucket policy using that crazy JSON syntax that Amazon uses. We also enabled versioning on our bucket and then uploaded multiple versions of our object and deleted it so that we could see exactly how Amazon treats those different versions in the stack. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.